So I've been wondering about this. Why did NATO decide to piss off Russia now? Right? Why did NATO decide to invite Ukraine to join them and thus provoke this war? Is it just because they needed an excuse to print money in the United States? Well, if that would have been it, they could have just picked a war with an insignificant, tiny little non-nuclear country. Pick something in South America, pick something in Africa. Why did they have to pick Russia, Ukraine? And the reason for that, it just kind of dawned on me now, is because Russia, even before the war, has little motivation to pay back its debt. It should just default. There's very little. The only thing that's holding it back are maybe contracts that a few Russian oligarchs have with neighboring countries, and they don't want those things going down the crapper. So they're going to continue paying back their debt for the short term. But long term, they have no motivation to do that. Russia has its oil and it doesn't have anything else. That's what it sells. They have no industry of any kind. They just that's all they have. And they're going to keep selling it and the world needs it. What is Europe going to do? Freeze to death in winter? What is what would China, India, what are they going to do? They're not going to they'll buy that Russian oil no matter what. If Russia defaults or if Russia pays, Russia is still going to export its most the biggest piece of its economy. And compare that to countries like the United States or China. If they default on their debt, well, they're screwed, right? They still have industry that needs to be maintained by this international banking system. And every country owns each other's debt, right? So in an honest world, the oligarchs from one country would buy their own country's debt, and so the poor people from that country would pay back the oligarchs. But then that's very easy for the people to just wake up and say, wait a minute, oligarchs, you guys are oppressing us. But if this international debt is sold to other oligarchs and they sort of play hot potato with the debt, then it's very hard for the average person to keep track of who's screwing them. So every country owns every other country's debt. And Russia has no reason to pay back. So what NATO, the United States, said, well, you can default at any time. We need a reason to freeze your assets and at least get something out of you before you default, because you're going to default no matter what. And when you default, what's going to happen? Who's going to pay for that? Well, look at Sri Lanka. Tiny little country, right? It's got what, 20 million people? It's a tiny little shithole. They fucking export tea. Tea, for Christ's sake, not oil, tea. And the IMF can't afford to have them default. They're going to bail out Sri Lanka. Because if Sri Lanka goes down, then a medium economy is going to go down in some other country, neighboring country that has business with them or that holds Sri Lanka's debt. And if a medium country goes down, then a large country is going to go down. And if a large country goes down, the United States is going to go down. So the world banking system can't even afford to have Sri Lanka not pay back its international debt. Never mind Russia. And Russia has no reason at all to pay back. They're self-sufficient. I mean, they live terribly. It is a fucking third world nation anyway. But they have what everybody needs, oil, and they don't produce anything. They have no reason to pay back. I mean, the last time was what, 1998. They said, well, we're not paying. What are you going to do about it? What happened? Nothing happened. Russia says they're not paying. How are you going to fuck with Russia? They got oil, they got nukes. You ain't going to do shit. And now the West knew that Russia was gonna default. And that's why they provoked them with this NATO shit with Ukraine and froze all their assets. Let me know what you think.